The first story that I want to start with is from our home state of Florida. So the governor recently signed a bill that was actually passed unanimously in the House and the Senate. So, I mean, just before I even tell you what it is, think about how amazing it is that people on both sides of the aisle agreed that it was that important. But what they agreed to do was to mandate that every high school student in the state of Florida, in order to graduate with their high school degree, is going to have to take a financial literacy course. And in signing that piece of legislation, the governor here caused Florida to be the largest state in the US to have that kind of a requirement. So personally, I think that's fantastic. I know that one of the great regrets that I have is that I did not have to take a finance course or a business course in high school. And I managed not to take a finance course at university either. I minored in economics, but somehow didn't take any kind of personal finance course. So uh, I've learned a lot in the real world, but some of my lessons have been learned the hard way. So I'll put it like that. So I think the earlier people get started with personal financial education, the better. So I'm a big fan of that. And I know you are too. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm extremely happy that it has happened. I don't understand why it took this long to happen. It should have happened 50 years ago. And I would like to see every state pass that law. I'm a fan of states handling that kind of stuff on their level, not the federal level. But it's definitely something you and I have both been a big fan of, and it needed to happen. And so it's a beautiful thing.
The good news is that not every state is doing it yet, so there's more work to be done.
Exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, I think Florida recently surpassed, might have been New York, as the third largest state in the union by population. So that means Texas and California are both states larger than Florida that have yet to have a similar requirement mandated.
Yeah.
So I've seen the budget in California. They probably need to mandate it, but
I mean, they took out, check writing even and all the other stuff, anything to do with money. But it makes me think about on just a quick side note when, for our listeners out there, Matt and I were in a local leadership class in the community here 5 or 6 years ago, I believe now. And we went to one of the local high schools as part of our weekly tour walkthrough. And I was so excited because one of the high schools we went to, they actually had, and I believe they called it a GC class, a general contractor class. And they had a mock wall where students were framing walls, they were doing some electricity. You remember that?
I do. I know exactly the high school, and it was very unusual because a lot of school districts that I'm familiar with have vocational education, but they do it off-site at a different
Hmm.
campus, and they bring all the high schoolers from whatever high school in the district to that location. This was a little bit unique because the Voctech school was actually on campus at that high school.
Yeah. How awesome is that? I mean, I was a huge fan of that. And obviously, I'm a big proponent of anyone who's listened to our podcast over the past year or so. I'm a big proponent of skilled trades and hands on labor. And I would like to see every school possible incorporate that into their curriculum because I think you would see a tremendous benefit and a positive uh, end result to society in general.
I completely agree with that. And I do see where that goes hand in hand with financial education
Yes.
because the truth of the matter is that not everyone is cut out to be an academic and not everyone is cut out to be uh, an engineer or an architect or a biochemist or things like that. Some people really enjoy working with their hands. Some people are mechanically inclined. And I think there's been an unfair idea that vo- vocational work is unskilled or lower skilled or somehow less valuable. But the trends are certainly not backing that up at all. I mean,
Nope.
I know that HVAC technicians, for example, the that is not an unskilled position. You really have to know a lot to be a good technician. It's the same with auto work anymore. I mean, computers have totally taken over cars. I
Yep.
remember a couple of years ago, battery in my car died, and I have always changed my own battery. So I pull the battery out. I get a ride to the local auto parts dealership. I turn in the old battery, buy a new one, and I go put the battery back in my car and it won't start. So I call the parts store. They go, "Well, what car do you have?" And I tell them, and they're like, "Oh, you can't take the battery out. You kill the computer when you do that. Um, you have to have this special device that keeps the computer charged while you remove the battery." I'd never heard of such a thing. And I can't even change my own battery now. That blew my mind. But the point is that even something that used to be that simple is no longer
Yep.
that simple.
Yep.
It takes a tremendous amount of knowledge and a tremendous amount of skill to be able to work on a lot of vocational um, type jobs. And the pay is going up accordingly. You can make a very, very good living working in a vocation. So, in addition to financial education, I think having increasing, numbers of vocational occupations available for education, especially at the high school level,
Yep.
would be a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I agreed. One county over, we have a service company that I was talking to the one of the owners of yesterday, and they start their apprentices at $20 an hour now. So I don't know about our listeners out there, but $20 an hour as an apprentice, and you're pretty much getting paid to learn. That's very good money.
That is. And that's an entry level position.
Yeah,
And that basically works out to, what, $40,000 a year, something like that.
yeah,
That's not a bad starting pay rate when you're getting into a field, especially if you're someone who's going into it with a high school education. There's an advantage potentially.
yeah,
You and I have talked about this because I went to university, and sometimes I wish I hadn't because I didn't end up using the degree that I earned in my profession. And so in some ways I've looked back and thought to myself, well, if I had just started working out of high school, I would have had 5 years on my my actual course in life, and I might be in a much better place financially because instead of going into debt to take university classes for a degree that I didn't use, I could have started earning money and
yeah,
saving money and building my savings and building my assets so that by the time I had reached 23 years old, I might have been in a much superior financial position to where I actually was. So It's something to think about. I think people reflexively assume that everyone has to go to college, and that's just not the case. It's just not the case. And, it doesn't mean you can sit around in the basement and play video games all day long. But if you don't go to college and you do go get a job like that you were talking about at $20 an hour to become an apprentice, boy, 5 years, you're not an apprentice anymore at that point. You've got a very marketable skill, and the truth is, a skill like that you can take with you anywhere. It's very portable. So that's another thing to consider when you look at that sort of a career.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you'll be able to find a job anywhere throughout the country if you learn a skilled trade.
The Purposeful Podcast.